Hey, welcome back to Bob's Two-Car Garage. Now, since I bought this new table saw a few years ago, I've been wanting to build this cabinet to fit underneath it. Finally got around to it, so stick around. I'm going to show you how I did it.
Hi, my name is Bob, and I love my two-car garage.
First thing I'm doing here is just laying everything out that I think I would like to go underneath my table saw. I'm kind of prioritizing things here because I don't think I can get it all underneath there. I used 3/4 inch plywood for the sides. Now I cut them 27 inches wide, which means that I had to use more than one sheet of plywood in order to complete this project. If you want to be more economical, I could have made them 23 7/8 and gotten more out of that sheet, but I've got plans for the rest of the sheet, so that's okay. And you know, quality is remembered long after price is forgotten, usually. Now my table saw has a mobile base on it, which means when I push the foot thingy, it's going to raise up about 1 inch. So I want this box to be able to slide out when I raise the table saw with my mobile base. So I'm giving it a 1/2 inch clearance once the table saw is raised up. I'm cutting my sides 30.5 inches tall. It gives me a 1/2 inch for my wheels and a 1/2 inch clearance once I lift the saw up. Well, I really love my little Sawstop. I think it's been a great saw, except for these little legs right here, kind of flimsy. Now, I actually ended up removing these legs completely. They don't really hold the saw up unless I decide to stand on it or something. So they're pretty much there just for safety. They do have these little adjusting feet on the bottom that help you to level your saw out. But for me, I'm just going with the cabinet to hold up that end of the saw. I'm putting dados on the bottom side of each of these sides. At this point, I was ready for some preliminary assembly, and I just used 2-inch screws, no glue. And while I did this, I watched a couple of my favorite old TV shows. Once I was sure the basic size was okay and everything fit, I cut this little interior panel right here. And to notch out that interior panel, I used my table saw and my jigsaw. I used pocket hole screws and 2-inch cabinet screws to secure that panel. I cut this little toe kick for the bottom right here. This is going to get glued and nailed in place. Now on the top side here, I ripped some 3-inch strips of plywood and put some rails in there, and then I laid one 6-inch wide piece down flat. I purposely did not put a rail in the back because I wanted that height. I'm going to put some iron-on edge banding on the front edges of all my plywood here, and which I think is great stuff. For years, I used this old travel iron that my mom bought me for like many years ago, and it worked great, but it was starting to fall apart. So I went out and I bought this fancy iron for iron-on edge banding, which I thought would work better. But you know what? It doesn't work that great. I'm going to stick with my old broken down iron because it just works way better. I've tried a lot of different ways to trim off the extra little bit of iron-on banding here, and I usually start off with my flush cutting bit. Sometimes it tears out a little bit too much, so I'll revert to just sanding it off, but This is my preferred method if it works. If it doesn't, then I just sand it off. I'm going to put some holes in here using my handy dandy little template for adjustable shelving. I'm not sure really that I'm going to use it on this side, but it's way too hard to put them in here later, so I'm going to put them in and won't hurt a thing. They'll be there just in case I need them. Putting some little tiny wheels on it like this because I don't want to take up too much room off the floor. While I put these on, I'm watching myself an old episode of Gunsmoke. Great old show. Right now I just have a box. I'm going to put drawers right here. And this is going to stay open for sheets of plywood and such. And then my dust collector fits back in there. I'm making my drawers out of this 1/2-inch Baltic birch. It's got 9 plies. Great stuff. Now for these drawers, I did what's called a locking rabbet joint, and it's a great little joint. I did a whole video on this a while back, so if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Anyhow, I'm gonna go ahead and start assembling all these drawers. And while I put these drawers together, I think I'm gonna watch an old episode of Hawaii 5-0. Now I'm going to sand them a little and route the top edge with my little trim router, make them nice and smooth. And while I do here in my garage, I think I'm going to watch a little news, catch up on the latest world events. Now in order to make these scoops, first I cut out a template. And then I screwed that template to the back side of the drawer. And then I used my router with a flush cutting bit and scooped out the back side of each drawer. I went through the same process with the drawer fronts. These drawer fronts, by the way, were cut out of 3/4-inch plywood. And notice, it matches. I'm using these soft close drawer guides on the sides, side mounts, these little tiny screws. Put a little stick in here like this just to hold it up. I know they make fancy contraptions for holding that thing in straight, but I don't have one of those fancy contraptions, so I'm just gonna put these boards in here like this, and that way I get them in there nice and straight and squared up every time. I attach the fronts by first tacking them in place with my pin nailer, and then I came back later and screwed it from the back side with some 1-inch wood screws. All right, now for a finish, I applied this oil-based polyurethane, which I really like for the stuff that I have in my garage. It dries a little softer than the interior stuff, but it really lasts a long time. It repels moisture real well and even some chemicals. The first coat of polyurethane, I rolled it on and I thinned it down about 30%. The final coat was not thin, went on full strength. On the back side of my cabinet here, I want to have some power. I could just mount a power strip, but I think it's kind of underrated, so I wanted to not to have a bottleneck there. So I'm going to use some 12 gauge wire and mount some boxes and some heavy duty outlets so that I have some places to plug in my shop vac and possibly even the table saw as well. So I'm going to go ahead and wire this, put up the box on the inside and the switch on the outside so I can get to it real quick. So I really like the way the electrical turned out, because when I flip this little switch right here, the vacuum comes on and the table saw activates. Doesn't really turn on, but that's the way Sawstops work. All right, well, this finished product is going to work out pretty well for me. I've got my insert for my dado head in here. I got some extra push sticks in here. Got my riving knife in here. Down here, I've got my cartridge for my Sawstop, another little feather board, and in the bottom drawer, I got my dado head and a couple extra blades. I don't have a whole lot of extra blades, so don't need a lot of space for that. I know a lot of people will put a slide out drawer in here or pull out drawer in this little space, which is a great idea, but I just don't have that many blades, so I don't need that. I'm going to save this place for my wood feather board, my sacrificial piece that I use along the side of my table saw fence, and then I'm going to keep this open for some extra sheets of plywood. I want to leave you today with this proverb that says, "A wise man controls his temper. He knows that anger causes mistakes." So, I'm going to watch my temper. I don't want to be making any mistakes. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.